Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagglehaus. And in this video, that is right. The thumbnail you clicked on was correct. I traded my Avengers 1. As you can see right there up behind me, usually where my Avengers 1 sits, the book is no longer there. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about why I decided to trade it away, what I ended up trading it for, and then most importantly, talk about the idea of upgrading your books. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, doing those things I would appreciate. But let's get into this video here today. And of course, I did actually bring a lot of my books to San Diego Comic-Con this past weekend, including my Avengers 1. And going into the show, I did have the idea that it was going to be a possible thing for me to potentially trade some of my books. I mean, I brought a lot of stuff and I was really looking for, what could either be upgrades to certain things in my collection, or I was thinking about swinging a handful of books into one bigger size book. And when this opportunity eventually presented itself, I decided to make the move and to utilize my Avengers 1 in the trade. And well, I guess I got to show you guys what I actually traded it for. The books I ended up trading it for is this one right here, Turok Dinosaur Hunter #1. But obviously, Turok Dinosaur #1 from Valiant is probably not equal to the value of the book. So the dealer did throw in this other book right here, Superman 75, of course, Death of Superman. No, I'm just kidding, guys. Obviously, I'm just kidding. This is not the books I traded my Avengers 1 for. In fact, the book I traded my Avengers 1 for is this one right here. Well, this is an empty bag that used to hold a book that I traded it for. And the book I'm talking about is, of course, an Avengers #1, except at a CGC 3.5 grade. Yes, I actually upgraded my Avengers 1 comic book. Unfortunately, I do not have it with me because I actually left it with CGC, but I will get into that later on in the story. Let me set the stage a little bit about what I ended up doing at the show, why I ended up doing what I did, and just the overall philosophy of upgrading your books, and why, even though it's not going to be the most economical way to get higher grades, it might be the best way to get to the grade of the book that you ultimately really want. So let me set the stage a little bit. Again, like I mentioned, I went to San Diego Comic-Con this past weekend. I brought a bunch of books with me. And as I am a ruthless general manager for my Swagglehaus collection franchise on my sports team analogy here, I brought a lot of books with me to potentially swing into other things. I was definitely looking at X-Men 1s, Hulk 1s, Tales of Suspense 39s. I was definitely open to the idea of swinging into a bigger book because, in this current economic situation we're in, you heard a lot of people talking about in some of the other interview videos I've done where a lot of dealers are open to the idea of doing trades to bigger books because they want to trade down into things that might be a little more liquid for them at this current moment in time. So I went into the show, started talking to a bunch of dealers, tried to identify some potential trading partners, but ultimately at the end of the day, there was no one I could really make a deal with. There was actually one Tales of Suspense 39 at a 1.8 grade that looked like it had a good potential, but that particular dealer didn't want to do a straight trade. They would only be willing to do, maybe 1 or 2 books for cash. So once that kind of went out the window, I went to sort of the next phase of my plan. And my plan was that I was actually bringing my Avengers 1 to potentially upgrade the book. I actually did want to get a higher grade of it. Of course, you guys may remember that I picked up my Avengers 1 from A1 Comics. Shout out to Wes and the team over at A1. And that particular book was at a 2.5 grade. And, it's a great book. I was super happy to have it in my collection, but it did have a little bit of a stain on it. But of course, the biggest flaw with it was the grade itself. Nothing against 2.5s, but as we know on this channel, Mrs. Swag does not allow 2.5s in this house.
I told you, we don't bring 2.5.
We don't bring 2.5.
So I really was open to the idea of upgrading my book. Now, a couple things happened at the show that really pushed me to making a play for this. The first one is shout out to Hell Destroyer Comics. He actually ended up picking up an Avengers 1 at the show from Red Hood Comics, and the copy he got was a 3.5, absolutely beautiful copy. Like one of the best 3.5s I've ever seen. I'm actually really jealous of him because that was a beautiful book, and he got a really good deal on it. He paid straight cash and he joined the Avengers 1 club. So I was super happy for him. And that kind of got my, not FOMO brewing, but I was like, man, I want to be on Team Hell Destroyer here. I gotta get myself an Avengers upgrade. And then also the other thing that happened is this was the day before Saturday when I actually made this trade happen. We had those leaks that were coming out that the Marvel panel was going to be announcing Avengers Kang Dynasty and Avengers Secret Wars. And that got like my FOMO brewing. You know, even for me at this point in my collecting, like I am not immune to FOMO. So when I heard that we were going to be getting Avengers announcements, I thought it was going to be a good play to do to upgrade my book before we actually got this Marvel panel. And being that I had, you know, my current Avengers 1 in hand, I had some cash on the side, and I had other opportunities with dealers here, I thought that this was going to be the best opportunity to actually trade up in this situation versus, say, having to win a live auction bid or buy it now for an Avengers 1 book that I really want and then have to like sell my other one eventually. I would rather just sort of do a trade and walk away with it, you know, that day. So as I was walking around the show, I came upon the Blue Chip comic. Shout out to Nico, the owner of Blue Chip, and he had an Avengers CGC 3.5, really nice presenting copy. There's a little chip in the corner and things like that, but you know, a book that I felt like presented much nicer than the one that I had. So I, you know, approached him and kind of threw out my plan. I was like, hey, you know, I have this Avengers 1 2.5. I'm interested in upgrading my book. I don't know if you'd be open to something like that. And he said that he was open to it, but he tends to do sticker price plus 10% in order to do partial trade situations. So really, you know, he had his book marked at $4,800, plus he was doing a 10% thing. So effectively trade value wise, it would be around that like $5,200 level. Now, if you guys saw my video where I talked about trading, where I made the play for Silver Surfer 1 and I interviewed FVF and he was telling about, you know, what the dealers are looking for in trade situations, you guys would kind of understand that, you know, Nico and the Blue Chip, he's trying to make a sale on this book, right? He wants to move this inventory. He doesn't really care to do lateral moves necessarily unless those lateral moves are going to benefit him in some kind of way. So he was like, you know, this is kind of the price I'm looking at. What would be the price that you would put on your particular Avengers 1, and I would have to get a good deal around that. So we got to talking, we got to negotiating, and you know, let's kind of dig into the numbers here, and I'll show you guys some of the prices of the books and sort of what it looked like in terms of how we were sort of breaking down the trade. Of course, you know, we're talking about an Avengers 1 here, first appearance of the Avengers team, origin of the Avengers, and if we go down here to the GPA, we can take a look at what some of the values for these particular books are. Now, the 3.5 grade is the one that I ended up trading into. You can see the 90-day moving is 4,300. Although I think this is kind of an anomaly number because you can see the last sale right here was actually 3,480, and this is coming off of 3 straight sales around 4,800. I mean, it's not like, you know, we had a July 17 and a July 24. So we immediately agreed that we would throw out this 3,480 number. And we would take a look at some of the more averages right here. So, you know, for him, he said that he was still into the book for $4,800. That would be his price, but he wants to do the 10%, which would bump it up to 52. And that sounded too high for me. I didn't want to have a trade value at that particular price point. So we were negotiating his price. And then meanwhile, we were looking at mine, the 2.5 grade. You can see 90-day moving is 3,400. You guys may remember that I picked up my book for 3,200 last year. And you can see some of the sales. I mean, this book is a little more swingy. You have a 4,300 here. But again, kind of like how you have to throw out the highs, you got to throw out the lows. You would throw out the 4,300 and really you're looking at the prices for 33, 31, 31, 31, 32, 34, things like that. So effectively, he eventually agreed to sort of purchase my book at the $3,100 price point, right? So that was what he was going to value my particular book, and he wanted to still get $5,200 for his value. But, you know, to me, I said, hey, you know, I don't know if I can go up that high. It's a little out of my budget range. Really, I can maybe give you my book and, you know, maybe offer you $1,500 on top of that. But for him, that was way too low because that would have put his effective value for his book at $4,500, which although that is a fair value when you look at some of the past sales, potentially that could be the value of a 3.5 grade. For him, he wanted to stick to more of the $4,800 price point. So we went back and forth, had some conversation, you know, kind of made some jokes with each other. Eventually he said, hey, look, you give me your book plus $1,800 and we would walk away both, you know, happy about the situation. After a while, I gave it some thought about it. I felt the FOMO of Avengers, Kang Dynasty, and Secret Wars being announced. I definitely was feeling that. And, you know, I really had to think to myself and just think about, like, I came in here to upgrade my book. I want a nicer Avengers 1. This is part of my journey to eventually get to a 7.0, which, by the way, guys, the goal is to eventually get to an Avengers 1 7.0. The reason for that is because that would put me in the top 10% of Avengers 1s, which is where I want to be ultimately as having sort of an exclusive book. So after we put it at that, we shook hands. I gave him $1,800 in PayPal, gave him my book. And, you know, at the end of the day, we got the deal done. The only problem with this whole thing was that the Avengers 1 was in an old label. Yes, that is right. And I don't know about you guys, but personally, I really do not enjoy the old CGC labels. So I immediately walked over to CGC and asked if I could just do a reholder. I did drop it off with them to get the book reholder because I felt like my prized book needed to be in a nice, clean case. So apparently it's gonna take like 30 days or so to get this book back. Eventually, when I do get it back, I will you know, do an unboxing. I think that'll be a good time to talk about the Avengers Grail run, and I'll try to think of a good way to sort of spin the video to provide some value for you guys. Oh, but I forgot to say, there was one more thing. Before I actually dropped it off to CGC, I did take the book over to Phil from Champions Comics. He's a great guy, great store in the Bay Area, and is a really, really talented comic book grader. And I just quickly asked him, I'm like, hey, can you just give this a quick look over to make sure this is actually the correct grade, that I'm not going to reholder this book and get some like lower grade or anything like that? And sure enough, he took a look at it and he was like, no, you should be good. Don't worry about it. There's no way that they would downrank this thing. So just had to make sure that I actually bought the right book at the right grade before I sent it into CGC. Now, I must admit, after I did make the trade, I did have a small bit of regret because I know that I didn't get the absolute best deal I could have done if I were to sort of start fresh and find this book or pay cash for it. So there was a part of me that felt a little bit unsure if this was the right move. But sure enough, once they announced Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, I actually felt a lot better about my decision. And really, I think the main takeaway of the video is talking about this idea of upgrades. You really should utilize this current market, this current bear market situation to upgrade some of your books in your collection. And even though trading with dealers may not be the best like economical way to get into a book, like when I think about how much I'm actually into my Avengers 1 book for, it's not that I've completely overpaid, but at the same time, you know, if I took all the cash that I'm into the book for today and I was able to make a bid on something out there in the market, I could probably end up with Avengers 1 CGC 4.0. I think that that would be, you know, kind of where I'm at, where basically I've lost a 0.5 grade in all the wheeling and dealing and trading of my Avengers 1 book. But at the same time, my budget is only my budget at the time in which I have that money. So it's not like I could have rewound the clock back to when I originally got my Avengers 1 and told myself, you know, in the past that, hey, you know, eventually you're going to spend more close to 5K for your Avengers book. You should just actually just buy a 4.0 right now. That like, I wouldn't have been able to tell myself that because I wouldn't have had the budget to do it at that particular time. And that's something I think is really important to remember. You know, this is a process. This is a journey. Even Nico was talking about this as being a dealer for the blue chip. He talks about how he really values the trade, especially as a collector, because that's the best way for you to eventually slowly upgrade your collection. Tomorrow, I'm going to have that video come out where I talk to a lot of the dealers, and Nico really gets into that. So he's really supportive of the trading process. And even if you lose a little bit of equity in some of the books that you really want, like I'm definitely losing equity into my Avengers 1 for making this trade, I've been able to find equity in so many other books that I've purchased for myself and I've sold and things like that, that, you know, it's okay. I can utilize the extra equity I have in books that I don't care for and put it into the books that I actually do care for, like my Avengers 1. So that's kind of my story. That's my trade. You know, if you're out there thinking about upgrading your books, I highly recommend it. You know, whatever comic book show you go to, bring some in your backpack or take a backpack, take some images of what you have, go approach those dealers, offer them some trades. And I think that you'll definitely be happy for being able to upgrade your collection. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and we'll see you in the next one.